Los 50 años de la Universidad La Gran Colombia Seccional Armenia significan medio siglo de trabajo colegiado, contribuyendo a la formación de generaciones más justas, competentes, responsables y más humanas. Son 5 décadas de avance, transformación, resiliencia e innovación que han conducido a la solidez y posicionamiento de una institución educativa que sin duda ha impactado positivamente en el ámbito social y económico en el corazón del paisaje cultural cafetero colombiano. Felicitaciones, estudiantes, graduados, docentes, funcionarios y directivos gran colombianos. Universidad La Gran Colombia Seccional Armenia, más de medio siglo formando los líderes de la región.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this international conference hosted by the Faculty of Law and Political Sciences and Social Sciences of Universidad La Gran Colombia. This conference is titled International Law and Relation Talks. This is the strategy of English across the curriculum for the postgraduate level. Today, we will be having different speakers from several parts of the world. And in order to introduce them briefly, I would like to greet them. Welcome, Professor and Dr. Ibu Rina Sharashula. Welcome, Dr. Natalia Trigu. And welcome, Professor Ji-Yoon Park. And today we will also start with a small greeting from the director of the International Languages Center of Universidad La Gran Colombia, Manuel Fernando Rios, who will greet us now. Go ahead, Manuel.
Thank you, Veronica. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to share this moment with all of you. Well, a special thanks to Ibu Rina Sharula from Indonesia. Well, it's amazing that now we can have this online space to share. Like we had different seminars and conferences in Indonesia, me as a speaker, and now being in the other side of the computer, of the camera. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for letting us know about your knowledge, your experience, and well, all the information that you can share with us. And we hope this is not going to be the only chance, that we can have many other opportunities in the future. Also, special thanks to Dr. Natalia Trigu. And well, also we had the chance to meet in Brazil, and well, we hope that in the future you could also be part of our university, and well, also thank you for being in here, for taking this time. And also special thanks to Professor Ji-Yoon Park for being here. We haven't met yet. I love that word, yet, but I hope that in the future we can have the chance to do it. And well, for all the people that are watching us, for all the students, also special thanks for the students of the different master degrees and postgraduate programs of the university that are taking important part of this, and well, all the different students and faculties of the university. Also, thank you, Teacher Veronica and Teacher Diego, for being here, for making it happen. And well, get ready, because this is not going to be the last chance that we can prepare a conference, a seminar in English. It's a big door that in the future we can continue in the development of different programs and part of the international aspect of the university. And well, for all the people, we hope that you can enjoy this experience, that you can learn from different perspectives, different cultures, different points of view. And well, we are now part of a global village, and it's amazing that we can share some words with people from different parts of the globe. And well, remember, this is a talk, so please be very participative in the chat, ask questions, and well, the idea is that we can interact each other. I know that maybe we are very far from each other. Even in Indonesia, in Asia is like 7 a.m., right? But well, thanks to technology, we can have this chance. So enjoy it, and don't forget to participate, to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teacher Manuel. Now we'll be having an intervention from an alumni from the university who is currently a teacher in the Faculty of Law. Dr. Diego Lozano. Go ahead.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Manuel. Okay. Good evening. A warm greeting to our guests, students, teachers, and the entire community that is joining us today. My name is Diego Lozano. I'm a student of the Master's degree in Public Law. I'm also a teacher at Gran Colombia University. For me, it's a pleasure to be here with you. We are fully convinced that learning English is essential for our openness to the world and the development of our careers. We are committed to improve our skills and having a more international focus. Therefore, the university has decided to join forces so students and professors can develop their skills further and help us become a truly international institution. By doing so, we believe we are building key capabilities to face the challenge of the 21st century. In my experience, first as a student and then as a teacher, I have witnessed the effort involved in learning a second language. However, it is worth it. You can get to know new cultures easier. You can interact with other people even if neither of you has English as your native language. I speak on behalf of the students and teachers when I welcome you to this university that is also yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Teacher Diego. Now we'll be hosting the different speakers are going to do a 10 to 15-minute intervention. And afterwards, we will have the questions of the students and the public in general who is watching us through Facebook Live. So just go ahead and all the questions, comments you have, go ahead and leave them in the chat. So the first intervention will be done by Ibu Rina Sharashula. She is a Ph.D. of Law from the T.C. Burney School of Law, the University of Queensland, Brisbane, Australia. She was the former head of postgraduate study of law and faculty of Universitas Internacional Batam. She is the current senior lecturer of law and law faculty head, and she's head of Women's Studies Center from the Universitas International Batam in Indonesia. She is a writer and a researcher of topics related to safe and fair migration in the ASEAN region. So this is such an honor to have you, Ibu Rina. Go ahead, we are all yours.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Veronica. So let me share my slides. Okay, can everyone see the slides clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, okay. Good evening, everyone, and this is very good morning from Indonesia because it's around 7 o'clock a.m. in Indonesia. So I would like to present about the implementation of migrant workers protection under the international and ASEAN legal instruments in Indonesia. This is basically my research with ASEAN Secretariat. So for the past 2 years, the ASEAN Secretariat in Indonesia hired me as a national expert in doing migration workers protections. And then this is research funded by the ASEAN EU partners, dialogue partners. So let me start. So if we talk about the source of law in Indonesia, basically we have a general source of law, which is laws and regulations, including the codifications, and we have custom. If we talk about custom, because Indonesia is basically, I can say, is a mixed legal system. Why is that? Because originally, if we look at the tradition, it's from the civil law system, okay, because we have the codifications and then the law and the statutory approaches. But then we have our living law, what we call it adat law, in particular regarding to the land, okay, or we call it agrarian law. So we have also customary law in Indonesia. We have also Islamic law, because for the Muslims, in particular, if it relates to the family law, and then Sharia economic law, or the Islamic economic law, and then we are going to apply or adopt the Islamic approaches, which is quite different. So I'm welcome if you would like to know more about Islamic law, because I'm one of the professors teaching Islamic law as well. And we have also case law or jurisprudence. It's quite unique because we are not from the common law tradition, but for the case law, it's also considered as one of the important sources of law in Indonesia. But then there's no binding precedents imposed in our legal systems. So the judges in the lower hierarchy does not require actually to follow all the judgment from the higher courts. But if the cases it's considered as the landmark cases, landmark decisions, and then there is a need for the lower courts to pay more attention to the previous judgment. And we have also treaty, in particular international treaty, both bilateral treaty or multilateral treaty. And then the last one is the doctrine. So the doctrine is very important, whether it's the doctrines is from the Indonesian jurists, Indonesian professors, or Indonesian lawyers, or from overseas. But this doctrine should be tested. So we use a lot of theory of law in Indonesia. So the students, if they want to write their thesis, dissertation, and even for the undergraduate project, they have to adopt, or at least they have to utilize one of the legal theory from Indonesia. So if we talk about that, the laws and the regulations hierarchy in Indonesia, the first is this is the highest, the 1945 constitutions, and then followed by the decree of the People Consultative Assembly, and then laws and government regulations in lieu of laws and government regulation, presidential decrees, and we have provincial regulations and also regional regulations. So this is the sources of law in Indonesia, general sources of law, and this is the hierarchy of the laws and regulations in Indonesia. So if we want to use all these sources, we have to use this one by one. First, of course, from the top, we cannot directly use like the government regulation. It is contradicted to the constitution, and is going to be a problem, because it can be a case that those who consider that the lower laws, violates the higher hierarchy, and then the constitutional court may handle the case if there is a complaint about that. Okay, so this is the main topic that I'm going to share with you about the international migrations. So if we talk about international migrations, basically there are two types of international migrations. What we call it outbound. So outbound means like from the Indonesian people go overseas to find work, to seek work. Okay, and then inbound. Okay, inbound meaning those who are from overseas, go to Indonesia to find better life or job. Okay, then so that's why there's a lot of international migrations going on in Indonesia. Okay? It's not in the year 2000, but even before the year 2000, there's a lot of international migrations, both inbound and outbound. But because of the COVID-19, and then the government has imposed some restrictions and tried to stop some of inbound and outbound migration as well. So some people ask whether these international migrations is basically because they want to find better life. The answer could be yes. But in most cases, when we interview those who are coming to Indonesia to work, the foreign workers, or those Indonesians going overseas to work, and basically not only for economic reasons, there's also from social reasons, okay? Because they want to find more experiences, they want to interact with other people, or probably they have relatives or friends overseas or in Indonesia who ask them to join in the forced work or the labor market in Indonesia. So if we talk about the cycle of migration process, this is more general. Even the International Labor Organizations also adopt it. There are actually what we call it full cycle of migration process, starting from pre-employment, pre-departure, post-arrival to return, and reintegrations. So in Indonesia, we call it before working, during working, and after working, and because it's written or it's stated in our law, but it's in general we can say that the migrant process includes pre-employment, pre-departure, post-arrival to return, and reintegration. So what is really the legal instruments on migrant workers in Indonesia? We have the treaty, and we have also the national laws and regulations. So it's kind of debate up to now whether Indonesia is a monism country or dualism country. So if I talk about monism, meaning the international legal instruments such as treaty conventions directly can be imposed on the Indonesian subjects, of the people of Indonesia, meaning the courts can use that treaty or can use that convention in order to rule the judgment. But then from the other side, saying that Indonesia is basically is not the monism, it's a dualism country. Okay, why? Because they say that the international legal instrument doesn't have an effect, okay, to the people of Indonesia unless the government, meaning the legislature, enact the law which is to harmonize between the national law and the international legal instruments or the convention, for example. So this is still a debate. I'm trying to be neutral in this because actually, if we look at the case law of Indonesia, sometimes Indonesia try to use the monism approaches and sometimes also use the dualism approaches. I don't know why the government used both. And that's why it's very unique about Indonesian law. Sometimes we become using the common law approaches, even we are actually the European continental, we call it in Indonesia, European continental approaches or a civil law approach. So it's kind of mixed in Indonesia. Okay, so those who come to Indonesia and study law probably needs about 4 years study undergraduate to understand all this kind of mix between the regulations and then also the international instruments intervention to our Indonesian law. So for the legal instruments on migrant workers, we have the treaty. We ratified the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights and all migrant workers and members of their families. We have ratified in 2012. And we have also in ASEAN, because we are a member of ASEAN. So we have ASEAN Consensus, which is signed by Indonesian government on the 13th January 2007. So all these international, what we consider as international legal instruments, we have to harmonize it. We have to transform it. Actually, if we use the term of the dualism approach, we have to transform it into our national law rather than directly impose to Indonesian law. So that's why we have laws and regulations, because of the ratification and the signature of our government to this ASEAN consensus. We renew our law concerning the Indonesian migrant workers, which is in 2017. Previously, we have this migration law in 2004, but then after the ratification of this International Convention on Migration, so we also adopt and then transform it, some of the provisions and some of the norms into our national law. So in this case, we adopt actually dualism approaches rather than monism approaches. And then we have also government regulations. In order for the law to work in Indonesia, for example, this law number 18 of 2017, okay, this is the norms, okay, all the norms and all the provisions regarding the migrant workers. In order for that to operate or to enforce it, the government issued the government regulation number 10 of 2020. So this is about the procedures of placements of migrant workers by Indonesian Migrant Workers Protection Board. And then we also have, this is a very brand new piece of law in Indonesia. This is very interesting because law number 11 of 2020 concerning job creation is actually it's the adoption of the tradition of the adoption of the common law tradition, which is we compile all different laws, because this is quite a big or quite heavy piece of legislation, because it's more than, I think it's 800 pages, because it's combined all the investment law and then about the employment law, and there are other laws, including the environmental law into it. Okay, so this is law again. Okay, we have to enforce it and how to make it work. Okay, and there should be government regulations. Okay, in particular because this is the law regulates or governs about the foreign workers utilizations. So there is a difference between this law in 2017. It's more about the inbound, okay? This is about the outbound, meaning the Indonesian migrant workers, meaning the Indonesians work overseas. And then law number 11 2020, starting from article 49, okay? It relates about the foreign workers, meaning those for foreigners who come to Indonesia to work. So what we call it is inbound migration. So what is really the consequences of ratifying international convention in Indonesia? So we have to implement the convention provisions based on the principle of pacta sunt servanda, meaning that once the international legal instruments has been ratified by the government of Indonesia, so the government of Indonesia has to obey and has to implement it by transforming it into our national law, if we use the term of dualism approach. Okay, and based on pacta sunt servanda, because this is actually the principle that we use, that once we ratify, the government ratifies the convention, meaning the governments will be bound by that convention or by that treaty. So accepting international surveillance measures, yes, that's one thing that why we are very active, also reporting it to international labor organizations. And then there's also the monitors from other institutions relating to the migrant workers protections in Indonesia. And that's the harmonization, national laws or international regulation, internal regulations for the implementation of the conventions. As I said before, that, well, once we ratify or sign, like the ASEAN consensus, and then the government is obliged, is actually to transform and perform its international obligations based on that international instruments, either by enacting new law or regulations, or introducing to the Indonesian people, and then make new policies regarding the harmonization between international legal instruments and national laws and regulations. So this is the consequences of signing ASEAN consensus of the protection and promotion of the rights of migrant workers, because Indonesia is an ASEAN member state, so it has a commitment to implement the ASEAN consensus. But still is a question how effective is ASEAN consensus actually, and this is quite a debate among the 10 ASEAN member states, because they say that, well, for those ASEAN member states that have a better economic level like Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, and Brunei, it seems they are quite closely to implement fully the ASEAN consensus. But whether we are like Indonesia and the Philippines, we are in the middle level, well, we're not that fully fulfill the obligation under the ASEAN consensus. But those are from, let's say, that less developed member states, ASEAN member states, among the other member states like Vietnam, Cambodia. Well, Vietnam is now, it's really trying to catch up with the other ASEAN member states, like Vietnam, Laos, PDR, and then they say that, well, there's a lot of violations, or there's a lot of misinterpretation and in applying this ASEAN consensus. But at the moment, the ASEAN member states are trying hard to harmonize all the performance, all the measures by the ASEAN member states. So we have unified movement, unified approaches to implement the ASEAN consensus. And then if we look at the data regarding foreign workers in Indonesia, we can see, I don't want to mention all this data because you can see just on the screen, it's actually, there's, in 2019, there's an increase, but then there is a decrease in 2020 because of the pandemic. And then the government also issued new policies that foreign workers temporarily suspended to enter Indonesia to get work, except for those who have already have their working permit in Indonesia. But if they want to apply for new job in Indonesia, and then I think it would be open after the government is really positive about the situation of Indonesia, because now Indonesia, especially from Batam, we are considered as red zone. So I'm stuck at home all the time, and other friends also doing so. We stay at home all the time. So if we look at the foreign workers by positions, we can see that, professionals, we hire more professionals. But I'm not really sure whether there are Colombians worker in Indonesia. I haven't really researched about that. Okay, but if we see also that the country, we have China on the top. Why China on the top? Because we have the contract. We sign a contract, we call it the turnkey contract, and this is quite unique because everything provided by the China, including the laborers. And this is kind of protest from many Indonesian workers. They say that, well, the Chinese engineers is not that great, Indonesian better, Indonesia know the situation. But then, since this is the contract between Indonesia and China, government under the turnkey project for the constructions, and we have to receive actually many Chinese workers, including those who are the laborers from China. So if we look at the data from Indonesian migrant workers who work overseas, again, we see the decrease in 2020 because of the government suspend the sending of migrant workers overseas because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if we look at now, this is quite sad to see because most of the placement or most of the positions occupied by the Indonesian workers overseas is always domestic workers. And then more and more Indonesia try to improve this. And we hope that, inshallah, someday we don't send only for domestic workers, but probably we can send more on professionals. Okay. And then for the placements of migrant workers, Hong Kong is the first. And then for the ASEAN countries, we have Malaysia and Singapore, and also Brunei Darussalam. So this is the countries where become the favorite destinations of Indonesian workers in ASEAN. Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei Darussalam. Probably because there's quite similar culture there, because we are basically from Malay culture. So what is really the problems relating to migrant workers? Even they are legal workers. Okay, Indonesians send the workers legally using the legal procedures, but sometimes they are quite naughty overseas because of the overstay, and then they lost the document or they expired of passports or other documents, and then they turn to become illegal workers. and becomes the illegal workers. Yeah, because no working permits anymore, no formal documents, and they may become the victim of trafficking, okay, or human trafficking, or they can consider as a crimes conduct. These migration problems is not only for Indonesian migrant workers, but also those foreign workers in Indonesia. This is very common happen in Indonesia for both of those inbound and outbound migrant workers. So what is I'm trying to propose is a sharing model for international migrations. As I mentioned before, this is really research that we conduct together with the team, ASEAN team. So there should be a sharing model, both information and knowledge. And then there's various action that can be do both from Indonesia and other ASEAN counterparts, updated online and integrated database for migrant workers in ASEAN. And then we have to share roles and responsibilities in monitoring and evaluation systems on the implementation of referral system. When I talk about referral systems, meaning if there is a problem regarding, let's say, Indonesian migrant workers in Malaysia, and then the Malaysian government should refer it to the representative of Indonesia in Malaysia, for example, the consulate of Indonesia or the embassy of Indonesia, or any NGOs work or focus on migrant workers issues. And also we have to share resources and services, meaning allocating budget to support one-stop service, which involve NGOs, academicians, and law firms, in particular pro bono, because this is very important for advocacy and also for those who are having a problem because of documents and other issues relating to law. They need lawyers to the court, or at least to report it to the police. So this is the sharing model for international migration. And then those stakeholders that we expect to engage in the sharing models, because the focus is the migrant workers, it's the government of sending and receiving states. Okay, if I talk about in ASEAN context, it's all the 10 member ASEAN states. They have to be responsible, they have to be proactive, okay, and then they have to implement the ASEAN consensus, as it says, and because the ASEAN consensus is full of the rights for the migrant workers, including the families. And then also employment agencies, and then the government has to monitor the legal employment agencies, because there are many illegal employment agencies. In Batam, there are quite a lot, like that. So this is quite a problem. Because we don't need a visa to go to ASEAN member states. Like we go to Singapore, Malaysia is only like 1 hour, less than 1 hour. Okay, so they can only use that visa, the ASEAN visa for 30 days, and they just work there. And then there's an agency, what we call it illegal agencies in Indonesia and also overseas. They connect each other, and then they send those people who work as domestic workers, or at the worst terms mostly. So there's also NGO. We need NGOs here, but both national NGOs and international NGOs, and also academicians, because to disseminate all the instruments, the legal instruments, both international or national instruments, about the rights and about the obligations of migrant workers. So it should be on the part of academicians to take roles. And then at last, I say law enforcers. Sometimes if we look at the piece of legislation in Indonesia, it's so beautifully drafted, and also a lot of focus group discussions, material examinations, formal examinations before enacting the law. But then when it comes to the implementation of the law, we are very weak in there. So that's very important that law enforcers have to be strengthened, and then they have to be law as it's mandated by the law, because the provision is so good, it's well drafted, but then when it comes to the implementation, it's very weak. And then sometimes a lot of violations or conducted by migrant workers, employment agencies, because of the weakness of the law enforcers in implementing the law. So what is the recommendation for Indonesian migration policies? As I mentioned before, Actually, this is quite a challenge for Indonesia because we send migrant workers overseas, and we also accept migrant workers from other countries, in particular from ASEAN countries. So we need actually protection for both procedural and non-procedural prospective migrant workers. In the law provides that both protection, not only for procedural but also for non-procedural prospective migrant workers. But then if you look at it, there's quite a problem with the non-procedural migrant workers because they don't use the government channel in order to work overseas. They use mostly employment agencies, which is considered by the law and also by the local government as illegal entities. And collaborative actions, as I mentioned, that there is a need for collaborative action between central and regional governments, agencies, NGOs, both in sending and receiving states. If we talk it about in ASEAN, there should be a very close collaborative action between the NGOs in ASEAN member states. Okay, otherwise it would be very difficult if the, for example, NGO in Malaysia try to refer to NGO in Indonesia if there's no collaborative action or there is no connection between those NGOs. So from this, there's measures is actually provided by the law, that the law itself, Indonesian national law, provided protective measures before working, and then protective measures during working, and protective measures after working. So because of the situation of COVID-19, and then as I mentioned before, the government imposed suspensions for the placement overseas and reducing job orders approvals. And then the government is very active in sharing information and education about the healthy life for the prospective migrant workers. But we don't send. But say, hopefully next year we start to open, because the government start to open actually about. There's about 32 destination countries, but still, very careful to look at how is the improvement of the COVID-19 situation, both in Indonesia and also overseas, where the migrant workers will be sent there. So protective measures during working is, because of during the COVID-19, there's a lot of information about health protocols, help desk, and then also circular letters and others about those who are actually end their visas, or there's no contract anymore and the government encourage them to go home. The government provide them subsidies so they can go home to Indonesia. And then also the government encourage those who are foreign workers, if their borders are open, to go back to their country when their contract ends. For foreign workers, it's about 2 years. 2 years. After the 2 years, they can extend actually their contract, but because of the COVID-19, it's probably most likely that the government doesn't want those foreign workers to prolong their contract. So protective measures after working overseas is actually every entry point in Indonesia. We have a health check at the airport or the ports. Okay, and then also there's shelters and hospitals, which is mandated to provide services to the migrant workers who are coming from overseas for the examinations of the COVID-19. And also the referrals and assistance for those who are for example, from the entry point, when they have to go back to their home town, but they lack of financial support, and then the government provides some assistance. So that's the focus is actually, or for the priority of Indonesian migrant policies, it's really the non-procedural prospective migrant workers, because the time is limited here. I'm quite restricted with the time, so we can discuss it later about what is the non-procedural process when we talk about the migrant workers in Indonesia. And informal sectors, a lot of informal sectors, people go to, especially from Batam, we just take about 45 minutes, 50 minutes by ferry, go to Malaysia. We can work there if we have a connection in Malaysia, and use actually the ASEAN visa. We don't need the permit, working permit, and etc. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of illegal recruitment agencies. Well, this is very booming in somehow in Batam, because I think those who use these channels, illegal channels, they also spread this and promote these agencies to their friends, to their neighbors. So they kind of use of that agencies rather than go to Indonesian procedurals or the government's procedurals to send them overseas. And we can discuss it more in detail later. So I think I cover about, well, 10 to 15 minutes because no one stopped me. So I think I'm still within the time limit. So I'm really happy if you can ask me questions. Well, you can ask me any questions about the Indonesian law or anything pertaining to migrant workers, inbound or outbound migration in Indonesia. But if you would like to talk about Islamic law, I'm very welcome as well. Thank you very much. And I'm back to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ibu Rina Sharaula. And we will have now the intervention of Dr. Natalia Trigo. She graduated in Licenciatura en Letras at UNSP. She received her Master and Ph.D. from the Programa de Posgrado en Letras at UNSPC. She teaches and at the Instituto Federal do Mato Grosso do Sul in technical education, undergraduate and graduate courses. She works in the area of teaching modern languages and literatures, and we're so honored to have you. So go ahead, you can share your screen, and we're all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. I hope you're all okay. My name is Natalia. I'm a language and literature professor at Instituto Federal do Mato Grosso do Sul, Brazil. Let me share my screen.
I just wanted to say to all the people who are listening, you can settle your questions in the chat, and we will read them at the end of the interventions of each of the speakers.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Give me just a second.
No. Not yet? Ah.
Yeah, now it works.
Okay, perfect. So today I'm going to talk about the international relations and current legal political dilemmas in Latin America from the novel His Excellency the Ambassador by Érico Veríssimo. Érico Veríssimo was an important Brazilian writer and has a vast work among short stories, novels, essays, biographies, and translations published between the 30s and the 70s. He's one of the most translated Brazilian writers, and his many novels are Music to the Far Across Past and His Excellency the Ambassador. His works are extremely critical and reflects on the history, society, and problems of Latin American countries. The romance takes place on the island of Sacramento, a country created by Veríssimo and located in the Caribbean. It is in this city that a revolution takes place, and the main character, the ambassador of Sacramento in the United States, Don Gabriel Eliodoro, needs to return to his country to defend the president and dictator, his faithful friend. The novel then builds a critique of the political problems that plague Latin America in general. In addition, it also brings the problems of international relations between Latin countries and the United States, from the economic and political influence of the rich brother to the prejudice view that North America had on Latinos. These spaces are fundamental for the construction of the plot, which are the United States and the Sacramento Island. The novel is divided into four parts: the credentials present the embassy, setting, and the main characters; the party, organized by the protagonist in Washington; the carousel, embassy relations and the power of democracy; the mountain, the investor return to Sacramento. Legal and political dilemmas in Latin American countries. Politics in Latin American countries are extremely problematic. Most of the time, the rulers are extremely selfish and take their actions much more based on their own interest than on the collective. These authorities use the law for their own benefits as an instrument to remain in power. These Latin American dictators are all made of the same stuff. But listen to this upcoming story. The end of the Generalissimo's second term was near. There was a clause in our constitution that prohibited his second re-election, but Carrera had taken a taste for power. Not only that, your manufacture would be destroyed if an opponent were elected. An opposite movement was taking shape in Congress. The people were unhappy. There was unrest in intellectual circles, especially at the university. Some newspapers began to attack the government. Clearly, Carrera should have thought of imposing on the electorate a candidate of his own that, once elected, he would rule like a puppet. But he concluded, it seems that it would be dangerous to risk a normal election. And what do you do in such a situation, my dear lady? It's clear that a danger is invented, a conspiracy is fabricated that makes exceptional measures necessary. And was it the obvious excuse? The imminence of a communist government. In the novel, the choice of Gabriel Eliodoro as ambassador also highlights the use of politics for his own benefit, as he does not belong to a diplomatic career and is only chosen because he is a loyal friend of the president of Sacramento. The novel highlights the complexity of man-nation relations that exist in Latin countries up to the present day, making laws much more guided by personal interest than by actual constitutional theories. That explains everything Carrera did on behalf of Gabriel Eliodoro after he firmly established himself in the government. They become close friends, compadres, and partners. And our hero has made a spectacular career socially and financially. And there we have him now as his country's representative to the White House and the Organization of States America. It is fantastic. Pablo told me that Gabriel Eliodoro didn't even finish high school, but El Libertador relies on his compadre's ability and sympathy to settle a delicate matter with the United States government. International relations between Latin countries and the United States. As we have seen, the responsibility for Latin America problems is not only due to its relationship with foreign countries. The very relationship with power and laws in those countries is already problematic. However, the international relationship that these countries have with others, especially with the United States, is extremely relevant for us to understand both the history and various problems on Latin countries. No country is alone in the international context of modernity. It is in this sense that Verissimo deals brilliantly with the international relations between the Latin country, Colonia Sacramento, and the United States. It was during the Chamorro government that North American capital entered and set foot in Sacramento. But the contracts between the government and representatives of the New York bankers were previously submitted to Don Rafael, who studied them with the advice of her friends. And between 1905 and 1915, the Caribbean Sugar Emporium bought land worth $40 million and began planting sugarcane intensely and the famous United Planter Company, known, feared, and admired or hated by the anacron Uniplato, established itself in Sacramento and dedicated itself to the cultivation and export of bananas, cocoa, sisal, chewing gum, and vegetable oils. The novel highlights the problem of the United States' international relation with Latin countries. Firstly, because of the confrontation of feelings that Latinos, in the case of the novel, The Ambassador, have towards North Americans, always bring a confrontation between admiration and criticism. U.S. financial interests overriding others, politics in the service of big business, and the contradiction of U.S. foreign policy in defending freedom and civil rights and supporting simultaneously undemocratic regimes and violators of the rights of its people. Regarding the controversial feeling of the Latin American people with the American, the ambassador on his way to the White House expressed the ambulance well. One day, I sneezed at the flag of the United States, hid behind trees. I took many stones on patrols by gringo soldiers. With those hands you can see, I wrote in charcoal on a lot of walls, Americanos pero sucios. Now, Pablo, here I go as my country ambassador on my way to the White House. Isn't that great? Here I am, Mr. Lincoln. I'm that dirty little Indian from Soledad del Mar. Remember? At the White House, the President of the United States is waiting for me. I showed all this son of a bitch that I have a cojones. According to Costa, the harmful participation of interested and U.S. intervention as pillars that support the inequality and degeneration of the institutions of your country, which, emancipated from the Spanish colonial, does not find the resource to free itself from the dependence of developed nations that, under the age revolutionary freedom, equality, and fraternity, they collaborate repeatedly with the annihilation of any initiative for a true democracy in Sacramento. Furthermore, we have the evidence of cultural judgment and the prejudice, ignorance, and colonialistic vision of North American characters in relation to the countries of Latin America. According to Vieira y Nascimento, the character Glenda expressed the view of the average American, racist and prejudiced, narrates and describes Latin America and Sacramento through a superficial point of view. Glenda is the expression of superficial intercultural judgments and colonialistic pretensions, where ignorance imposed by limited horizons implied arrogance in relation to the different interpreted as a threat, and a profound lack of empathy. She also liked the idea that Pablo Ortega, unlike most Latinos she knew, did not look like a gigolo, nor did he treat her as if he considered her easy prey. It was a shame that his skin was so dark. We reflect about important issues raised by the novel, such as intellectual, intercultural, and diplomatic relations between the United States and Latin America, as well as recurrent problems in Latin countries, including abusive authorities that do not respect the laws and that use power for their own benefit. Here's my biography. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natalia Trigo. Now we will have the intervention of Professor Guillaume Park. She is LUD graduated from the Law of Faculty at Yonsei University in 2005, also from the University of Pennsylvania Law School for LLM at George Washington University Law Institute for Pre-Law. She's licensed to practice law in New York City. She works as a professor in the Department of Law at Yonsei University from 2007 to the present day. Her current positions are Director of the Global Center, Director of Korean Language Center, Director of King Sejong Institute in Bandung, Indonesia, member of the Public Office Examiner, a member of the Diplomat Office of Examiners, committee member of the Busan Metropolitan City, and committee member of the Yangsan City. She holds a license to teach Korean as a second language and 2 patents. She has done many types of research in the field of law, such as international law, international economics, and international humanitarian law, and nuclear law. She has published several books, more than 60 articles, and currently enjoys working as an editorial board member of the International Review of the Red Cross, as well as several journals in Indonesia. Thank you so much, Professor Ying Yu Park. It's such an honor to have you. We are all yours. I think your audio is off.
Now I have unmuted. Can you see my screen? Screen is a bit, wow. Let me, hold on. Within the frame.
And listen, it's perfect.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. I hope you can see the screen of the file, Data Governance in Trade. Okay?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Now I'm going to talk about the data governance in trade. Okay. And what is data governance? I was trying to come up with the idea how we can share the idea of international law and relations up to the recent incident. And the most important issue in the international arena now is data governance. What is data governance? I just got it from the Wikipedia. Let me read it to you. Data governance is a term used in both macro and micro level. The former is a political concept, and there's another concept set up by the business. So there are 2 concepts relating to data governance. Do you remember there is a big issue between the United States and China? And what is at the center of their conflict is data. And I'm sure you know the company named Huawei, and the Huawei company's information and computer communication technology company, which is called ICT company. And ICT company, this company was collecting data in US and sending it back to China. That is why the United Senate, 여보 제발. United Senate has made a bill of blocking the purchase of government buying any of the products from Huawei. And because of this, Korean government also has been affected by this ban. And during this incident, and also the intensification of United States and China relations still is going on, and we wonder, why is this data so important, and why is data at the center of international relations and trade war? And if you look at the interest parties and industry development, we can see we have been protecting video, audio, books, and movies, and those things through the traditional format of copyright, and inventions were covered at the patent, trademarks. Those are the contents right? And then, although the commercial online service has showed at the 1979, actual development in the online was exploded in 1994 with the World Wide Web WWW service, right? American Online. And then 1995, Microsoft company introduced Windows 95. And then everybody was using that Microsoft device. Now everybody is connected and more connection is ongoing, and more of the technology companies are coming into the business using these connections and interface. If you think about it, this is from the traditional format of content to cyber data, right? So in trade format, let me share the interest parties of trade format. We just protected intellectual property inside of the territory domestically. Now the data is flowing transnationally, and interest parties are business parties, consumers, and also the policymakers. So those interest parties are in different setting and having a different goal. Let me share another slide which reflects the size of digital economy. In 2016, global economy in digital format is 15.5%. Now 2025, we are expecting this will grow up to, I think it is more than 25% of the whole trade. That means that trade will be conducted not by the goods, which is the tangible things, it will be conducted by the intangible format. But there's another problem is there is a no, let me just, these are the lot of slides that I've been trying to share, but since we only have 10 minutes, this is a problem of having tangible goods in trade and intangible goods in trade. Now, data, although concept itself is not decided at the WTO level, also the classification has not been decided. They are still discussing it. And second problem is every country has a define the data in different way. Is it goods? Is it service? Is it file? Is it signal? So all the country has a different idea of a different setting about the data. Now, we have talked about the relationship between United States and China. They are struggling to have more power over data. Let me just tell you the data and how many AI involved companies are in the international society. Can you guess? Around 4,500 companies are AI involved business companies, and half of the companies are located in the US, and 1/3 of the AI involved companies are in China. That is the reason they are fighting over data. In total, two countries are having 70% of the data collection capacity and companies. Without those companies, countries cannot have any data relating information, private information. But then again, there comes to another power, which is EU. EU has a big power. You know why? Let me show you the screen first. Okay. This is the e-commerce power, which means that who buys the products over online the most. Number one is Switzerland, and second is Netherlands, Denmark, Singapore, UK, Germany, Finland, Ireland, Norway, and Hong Kong and Korea is 18th, and other countries are at the various places. This means that all the information relating to individual buying patterns are going back to the place where the companies are collecting data. This means that EU consumers are giving information to whom? The United States companies. You know well about the GAFA, right? Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. They are the most big companies collecting data. And also the Chinese company, Tencent, and also Alibaba, they are the big companies. But where is a Euro company? There is none. So that is why EU, let me go back to the issue of, the electricity matters, issue of what is data. In 1994, EU said electricity is a good. Means the electricity actually we cannot touch. It's intangible. But they said in this case that electricity is a tangible good and even has the HS code. But then again, when it comes to the data, EU said this is not something that fit to the format of a goods trade. So EU and US has two different interests. EU wants to protect privacy of the citizen, and US wants data from all the countries. That is a big issue of it. So where are we heading? These are the one issue in terms of data. And second one is tax, because these GAFA companies and Alibaba, they are covering most of the consumers, and they are working in transnational manner. Every country wants some portion of the tax to be given to the company, multilateral companies. Now they are having agreement of putting the digital service tax. So second issue is the digital service tax, and this is a part of international relations. So number one issue is data, but in terms of data and what is the definition and what's the interest party, and second is how much tax they can put in each of the territory. So we are heading to the regulatory imbalance, and the EU has a big concern of this privacy. And I have collected many of the information, but I like to share that this transactional methods in terms of trade, the biggest concern for the relations now is data. So I hope you are interested more on the data matters, and the fight over the international relation is more likely focused on the data governance. And yeah, that's my presentation for the these matters. I hope I just have some attention over the data governance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Park. We're going now to read some of the questions because we have received about 26 comments. So there are a lot of questions. So I'm just going to read some of them.
Can I ask two questions?
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Excuse me for the interruption. Okay, the first question I want to ask is for Professor Rina. Professor, one of the main challenges in our country is to harmonize international law, especially the human rights conventions, with our internal law. My question is, which has been the main problem you have had to apply the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers in your country.
Okay.
And the second question
I
is,
answer it first before I forgot the questions because I don't have a note to write it down here.
excuse me.
Is it all right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
sure.
okay,
I guess.
right. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the questions. Yes, so we face the same challenging actually because international conventions regarding the human rights is really an international legal instrument which is supposed to be implemented and bound by all countries in the world who are members of the United Nations, and then because we are the international society. But then, okay, it's quite a challenge for Indonesia because at some point we have our own national regulations. And somehow if we face to face and try to harmonize between the international requirements and then our national requirements, sometimes somehow it has what we call it a gap, and we have to bridge this gap. I give you a very example. It's about we have already ratified one of the convention against torture. Okay, it's the international convention against torture, but some people say that it's actually Indonesia violates that convention. Why? Because in Aceh, one of the Islamic province in Indonesia, okay, apply slashing, in the public and stuff like that. Okay, but at the one point, because it's regulated under the Holy Quran, okay, and then this is mandated, which is all the Muslims have to obey that. But if you look at it from international perspective, they consider it is a cruel, okay, it's a cruel actions. But from the Islamic point of view, it's actually educating. Even if it's like the stick that they slash that person's or the rope is not that thick actually. But once they show it in public, and the public will realize that they're not going to do the same thing. Okay, and actually, one is a challenge because we talk about the human rights here, we talk about the LGBT. I don't know in your country whether it's free, but against a lot of controversies in Indonesia. They say, well, we never ever adopt that kind of approach because it's against all the religions. Okay, not only from the Islamic point of view, but from all religions, the Buddhists, the Hindus, and all this the religious scholars. They say no, it cannot be accepted in Indonesia. So it's really hard for Indonesia somehow. So that's why we try to harmonize it, but we try to bridge that gap, okay, by using some actions, which is proof that this actually Indonesia can comply its obligation under international law. But still, from the international legal perspective, international communities, it's a lot of critics that Indonesia is actually, they say that, Indonesia cannot fully comply with international regulations. But, that's our norm. So that's why we say, which one is higher, international convention or our constitutions? And we say, our constitutions goes first. Okay, sorry. This is a debate. It's a really academic debate in Indonesia at the moment. Okay, thank you. I think that's my question for question number one.
Thank you very much. It's very clear for us. So my second question, it's for Professor Park. Professor, the importance of data in our lives is more evident than ever. Huawei is a leader in 5G technology. Do you think that the sanctions on Huawei are necessary? Maybe it's a form of protectionism, or are they justified? What do you think about it? Thank you.
Thank you for the very big question. Actually, that's a big issue and one of the hot issue in the international community. I think US is trying to buy the time. Although they have half of the AI companies located in United States, China has a more population. They have a bigger power over the data. Yesterday, LG in Korea had successfully connected the signal to up to the 6G, even passing the 5G. So now I think we are heading to the 6G instead of a 4G. They're actually just passing the 5G to 6G. For the matter of sanction, it's just power game. It's not about the protectionism. Actually, United States does not need protectionism. They just need a word, and everybody will be following their guidance. But then again, because of the collection of the private information was very serious, since you are using the StreamYard instead of Zoom, maybe this is a part of protecting the privacy. Because if you use a Zoom, we basically know that our data is going back to the China, right? So everybody is afraid of sending my face, my finger to China. So maybe their sanctions will not be necessary, but it's a power game.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you for your questions, Professor Diego. Now I'm going to read a question for Dr. Natalia Trigo. There's a question from Jorge Candamir. He tells us, do you consider the relationship between the United States and Latin American countries is dependent on the submission of these Latin American countries to the United States, maybe in literature, maybe in the way we talk? Anything you want to share with us for this question?
Yeah, of course. In Brazil, we have a complicated relationship with the U.S. First, because of our previous dictatorial government, military dictatorial government that was financial by the U.S. And even nowadays, for example, our last president election, Bolsonaro election, we are now having some research about it, but probably the same company that used fake news on Trump's elections used it the same here in Brazil to elect Bolsonaro. So the US has this power in Brazilian culture. Everybody here thinks that everything that comes from America is better than from Brazil. So we have this history of submission in all over our history. First with the Portuguese colonization, after that with England, and nowadays with the US. And from my point of view, not even literature, but this is a problem in all Latin America. If we think about the military dictatorial governments that was a plague in our history, and even nowadays, I don't know about other Latin countries, but in Brazil, we don't really talk about this, about our past, about the military and all the horrors that came with that. You know, some people in Brazil, we still think that the military government was good because of the order and the authorities, and that the US is better than Brazil and things like that. So I think it is a problem, not only in Brazil, but in Latin America, that the relationship with the US, yes, is a submission relationship.
Thank you so much. We will read a couple questions more. There's a question about the middle point and also the engagement of migrant workers. So it says, Ana Maria Rojas says, what about the engagement of a migrant worker with the industry and its protection due to its illegality? I found particular legal voids in some countries to guarantee workplace rights, such as minimum wages and general entitlements. So this is a question for Iburina. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for your interest about the migrant workers and human rights in general. That's my area of research. Yeah, that's correct. That is actually, when we look at it, the engagement between the migrant workers, because I mentioned it before, that actually there are two types of migrations, inbound and outbound. So if we talk about inbound, meaning the foreign workers come to Indonesia because everything is monitored and it's online. Everything is quite legal, you know. So it's quite easy, you know, for the government to monitor that, because most of, I think I can say that 90% or more than 90% of foreign workers who come to Indonesia is actually through the procedural channels, the process which is regulated by the government, and then there is a contract. So between the industry, if the Indonesian industry or Indonesian companies who would like to hire the foreign workers, they have to provide many documents, including also the contract. And then there should be one Indonesian, or at least one Indonesian assistant, which is, we call it counterpart, to the foreign workers. Why is that? Because we have that there is a transfer of technology at the end, transfer of knowledge at the end, so that the foreign workers educate or probably give skills to Indonesian counterparts. So for inbound, there's not a lot of issues regarding the engagement between the inbound or the foreign workers and then the Indonesian industries. Okay, and only the protest actually from the engineers, from a lot of engineers saying that Indonesian workers are better than those who are foreign engineers, but why the Chinese engineers keep coming, things like that. But anyway, that's another issue. But the problem is when we talk about outbound. We talk about that Indonesian migrant workers work overseas. This is very difficult to monitor. Why is that? Because we have a lot of what we call it illegal channels, illegal employments, particular, well, Manuel knows Batam, how close it's to Singapore and to Malaysia. And you can just, for Indonesian, just use that passport. You can work about 2 weeks in Singapore or in Malaysia and then go back to Indonesia, or to Batam in particular, and have it stamped, you can go back again. So this is very difficult to monitor. And then also the industry in Malaysia or, employment recruitment in Singapore, they have channels in Batam. And most of them is not legal. They're quite illegal, meaning they don't provide report to the officers, the Indonesian officials of manpower. So it becomes a problem when we talk about the outbound, because outbound migrations, especially those people who live at the border, they can easily go out from Indonesia, and then it's very difficult to monitor. And well, excuse me, off the record, there's a lot of bribery involved there, both in Indonesia and also in the country of destination. Based on my interview saying that, well, this lady, always, because of the pandemic, she stopped going to Malaysia. But then before that, she goes to Malaysia often and stay only for like 3 weeks in Malaysia and go back to Batam without working permit, only use the ASEAN visa because it's permit to work, not permits to stay for 30 days. And she said that actually at the entry point, she has to pay about 60 ringgit, Malaysian ringgit, to certain individual there, okay? Because in order to, to give permission to enter the territory of Malaysia. And likewise, that's also happened in some part of Indonesia. In particular, we have what we call it in Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia, Pelabuhan Tikus, they call it mais port, meaning it's illegal port. You can just easily use that by small boats and you can go out from the Indonesian territory. So this is really the issues in Indonesia. It's quite a big problem about non-procedurals migrant workers, Indonesian migrant workers who work at the ASEAN member state, in particular Malaysia is in Singapore, because we are border, and Brunei Darussalam somehow, because there are also some areas of Indonesia really border to that that country. So well, that's really a challenge for Indonesia right now. So well, in summary, I can say that for the foreign workers monitor, it's quite okay in Indonesia, but for Indonesian workers monitor out, overseas, it's very difficult. We can really handle it from our side. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. We also have a question by Kateri Arya Soto. She asked, do you consider that data governance is positive for small entrepreneurs, and why? So this is a question for Dr. Park.
So the question was about the governance for the small business?
Yes, for small entrepreneurs, is it data governance a positive thing?
It is very difficult for small companies because they cannot collect all the data. That is why many companies, have you heard about the car sharing companies like Uber and Gojets, right? And I'm sure you have used it. You know why people and the companies are trying to go into the car sharing company is the reason they want the collection of the data of the person's movement. Car sharing is actually related to the data collection. They want to know where you've been, where you spend the money, where did you go, and who you meet. Those are the data for the companies. Even for the big companies, they need that data. But for the small and medium-sized companies, they cannot do. The only thing you can do is that if you have a big idea and can get the venture status and sponsored by the government, I think your idea blossoms in a way. Then you can have a funding from the bigger company, and you become the center. In Korea, because of the COVID pandemic, more of the venture companies are exploding now. And everybody wants to open their own business, having the app application. Even everyone in Korean universities, they are obligatory to take the coding classes so they can make application themselves. So everybody can make an application themselves and they can explore their own field of business, connecting to the bigger sized company. Then their idea will blossom and the smaller company will be protected later on. But for now, data governance is not for the smaller companies. They need to connect to the bigger companies. There are for example, there is a delivery service in Korea, which is called the Yogio. And this company was bought by the bigger company, but idea was really good. They just connect the people who want to deliver things and who want to be delivered. And there is application connecting two sides. And this become grown so much because individuals in Korea, they're not getting married. They're staying alone. They're living alone. They eat alone. So they need to deliver a service every day. They don't want to cook. They deliver things. So this Yogiyo delivery service become bigger, and the big company bought this one. So initially, this is not for the medium sized, but your idea become taken by the new generation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And the final question goes to Dr. Natalia Trigo. It says, how does an ambassador help to solve the social and economic problems of a country? So this is a question related to your presentation as well.
I think the ambassador has an important position, to not just as a mediator of the relationship between the two countries, but also for the knowledge of that country. And that's why it is important that someone that has the knowledge to do so. And that not is the case of the novel, and even from Brazil, because we had a problem. Our president wants to put his son as the Brazilian ambassador at the US, and he doesn't even speak in English very well. So how can he be the ambassador? So I think the ambassador is an important figure for international relations, for mediate the relations between countries. And this in Brazil is not so serious as it should be. Not just in the novel, but in life. So this shows how sometimes Brazilian laws, and I think Latin America in general, are more important if you know someone than the knowledge itself. And this can be problematic because we have some problems in Brazil with things that our presidents say that helps to create problems with other countries in all over the world. And the ambassador has, all ambassadors need to do something to create a better relations between countries. And that's right now for us is a little bit problematic more than ever.
Thank you so much for your answer. We have so many questions in the chat, but because of the time, I know we won't be able to read them all, but I just wanted to thank you for this talks, for these spaces. We are English across the curriculum, so we've been talking about such different topics, but such interesting conversations are being sparked. And we are so delighted to have people from all over the place, from different countries listening to us. So glad to have you, Dr. Rina Sharashula. So glad to have you as well, Dr. Natalia Trigo. And so glad to have you as well, Dr. Guillaume Park. This was such an amazing conference, and we would love to keep on hosting this type of events because we want to continue to promote English as a second language in the pre- and postgraduate levels. So thank you so much, everyone, and hope you have a good evening and a good night as well, and good morning to you guys in the other countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nice to
Terima
meet you.
kasih banyak.
Terima kasih, terima kasih.
Muchísimas gracias a todos y feliz noche.
La Universidad La Gran Colombia Seccional Armenia inició su operación en 1971. A través de sus ejes misionales de docencia, investigación y proyección social, viene auspiciando el amor por el saber al servicio de todos y la preservación de nuestro entorno histórico, social, ambiental, espiritual y cultural con base en la vivencia de los valores humanos. Universidad La Gran Colombia Seccional Armenia, más de medio siglo formando los líderes de la